Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth testified before Congress today, asking for a historic boost to defense spending. The Trump administration's proposal would up the military budget to $1.5 trillion. Hegseth stressed the need for more drones, missile defense systems, and warships. The hearing then turned to the cost of the Iran war, which Pentagon officials estimate at $25 billion. Nebraska Congressman Don Bacon is on the committee, which was questioning Hegseth. He encourages the president to keep pushing Iran.
So I think we have to continue putting the pressure on, and this blockade is vitally important. It's working. Let's keep the pressure on. This regime's going to have to acknowledge that they're losing and that they cannot have a nuclear program and that they cannot be a threat to their neighbors.
Right now, the tense ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran is holding in spite of that blockade. Iran is reportedly working on a new peace proposal, which officials will present in Pakistan in the coming days.